Today, a so called expert will break down the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting, or really a dumpster fire, is what it was. This guy, this suspect, this assailant, attempted to blitz his way into the floor where they were having the dinner. He wasn't even on the floor where they had the dinner, and he ended up shooting an agent. He himself got shot, is what they're saying. So let's listen to this expert, man, talk about this incident.
Slicing. He's a former FBI supervisory special agent and a CBS News contributor. Lance, thanks so much for joining us. So let's talk about your assessment.
I love it when they go and get the first skinhead they can find. That's my favorite. Let's go and get some guy that looks like he attends certain meetings and he's on certain web pages and he can't wait to skin his head all slick like.
Vis-a-vis the response from the various agencies that were involved here, the Secret Service, local police, the FBI. What did you make of the response to the shooter?
Sure. Well, first, let's talk about what went right. This was, they call it multiple things, concentric ring of security or layered security. So likely outside, there were restrictions on streets and parking garages. Then you had an ID check coming in the hotel. Then you had one of the last security checkpoints, which was the magnetometer and armed security. And the subject was stopped there by the heroic actions of the
Stupid Kennedy. Why are they rushing him out for? Why is he being walked out? Well, nobody want him. That guy looks nothing like the Kennedys. Like, that boy looks like he was laid by buzzards and hatched by the sun. And that's a fact, big bro.
agents and officers involved. That was what worked right. However, it stopped at one of the last security checkpoints. That's where the subject was detained. So that requires a level of, to look at that. You want to really examine that closely because it was one of the last levels of security.
And Lance, we're also learning more about the suspect, who this person was. He wasn't really on law enforcement's radar. He didn't seem to have much of a record, if any at all. What more do we know?
Yeah, well, we know a lot, and the manifesto was one of the reasons we know a lot. Now, I would caution, though, a manifesto is really evidence more than it is an explanation. It's what the subject wants everybody to know as to what he was thinking and why he did what he did. However, investigators are going to be looking at everything, not just that manifesto. They're going to be reviewing online accounts, any associations he had, potential mental health issues, personal grievances, all of these things to try to see if this was more widespread or not. So the manifesto definitely helps investigators, will help prosecutors when it comes to trial. But right now it is evidence. So investigators need to keep an open mind.
So I'm going to be fast forwarding anytime they show an image of this guy because I don't want to see this freaking guy, bro. Freaking mixed dude with a freaking nappy head, half a afro, half a receding line. Like, come on, bro.
Start dating. And that happened very quickly. The FBI was at the house.
And immediately, in the films, you get a phone call to local police calls the FBI gets in touch with Secret Service, and minutes before somebody can do something nefarious, he or she is stopped in their tracks. We know that in this case, a family.
They kill me with the something nefarious. The boy was not even close, which is why he was running full speed with a bottle of Gatorade. He wasn't even on the floor where they were having the dinner. Like, come on, bro. Oh boy, Carl Lewis. Facts.
Members of the suspect did call into police and say that they had some concerns. Can you talk about, just from the federal law enforcement, how that would actually happen in the real world? You get a tip Do you know where he is? Do you like how does that work?
First of all, it's assessing that credibility and immediacy of that tip, which is extremely difficult nowadays. There is so much rhetoric about conspiracy theories online and just blatantly out in the open that there are a lot of threats that come in. You got to assess that credibility. Does the individual have the means? Are they close? Do they have the proximity to do it? Are they really legitimate with this threat? And it takes a law enforcement agency to work together with others and take it seriously to take those steps. Oftentimes, the suspect hasn't taken steps. They've just made statements. And if those statements don't cross a line, there's nothing you can do. So it is very
have you
difficult.
ever seen such
really,
a farce?
what it comes down to are people that understand the individual that's thinking about a violent incident, seeing their changes, seeing them start to get weapons or really focus on the violent part of that grievance.
Why do they keep showing this
tell
guy?
law enforcement
Like anybody on the
give
planet
them time to work it.
That's
really what stops this, rather than the movies that make it immediate and immediate.
Look at the brother.
And Lance, there's been talk about potentially elevating this event to a national security event. What does that mean exactly? And how does that type of security, like what we see at the Super Bowl, compare to the security that we had at the White House Correspondents' Dinner?
Yeah, well, it adds a lot more authority for law enforcement agencies, and a lot more resources going in there in order to lock it down. And what I would say, it varies from venue to venue. You mentioned Butler, Pennsylvania, very different venue, wide open. That shooter was able to get a line of sight on the protectee. Here, there's also, while it was a closed event, inside, it was a multi-use facility. It was a hotel. So you have a lot of people.
I tell you, we are a country that suffers from just a lack of any type of journalistic integrity at all. Like if you have a degree in journalism or media communications, therein lies your journalistic integrity, and it starts and stops there. Other than that, that's the dumbest question I've ever heard. She's comparing the stupid Super Bowl to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. There's no comparison. Everybody in that venue could run into that press box at the Super Bowl and it's over. It's a wrap. The White House Correspondents' Dinner, they could handle things a lot quicker, a lot easier, a lot more efficient, with a higher level of proficiency. Like you can't even compare the two. It's just, I tell you, our country suffers from a lot of things. But the one thing that we are struggling really bad with is our media is so stupefied and just out of the loop. You got to go to Unicorn Riot. You got to go to the homies in the hood webpage just to see what's really going on, bro. That's where we at with it. And the powers that be is just fine with them. You know, it's just fine with them that nobody watches the news anymore except them and a bunch of goofballs that'll believe anything they see on TV. Like it's just a farce.
With a legitimate right to be there, people who paid to stay in those hotel rooms, like the suspect did. So it added a layer of vulnerability into this venue that you can see was absolutely vulnerable. The suspect got that hotel room because he saw that vulnerability and allowed him to get close. What you would like to see in a national event is a closed facility, something where the entire facility is part of that threat landscape, and then you can lock it down a lot better. You don't have mixed use.
Does it matter, Lance, if you, one of the things that people, and this is interesting, my colleague Nate Burleson asked me this on CBS Mornings. He said, you know, there's so many conspiracy theories out there about what happened when it comes to this incident. And all I could think of was, we have a country now that is awash in guns and weapons. Anybody can get their hands on them, both legally and illegally. We have a mental health crisis, which is something this administration and previous administrations have tried to address. We have social media, which now you add that into the mix.
And fake videos and AI.
And AI, artificial intelligence. And so when it comes to this manifesto and the things that this suspect has written, alleged to have written, Are we to think that this is just an isolated mental health incident when you factor in?
What does AI have to do with it? Like, what does AI have to do with it? Well, the guy's not a hologram.
All those things, he bought those weapons legally. He's on social media, writing on social media. Or are we, as some are sort of lamenting, saying that there's a real problem with political violence in this country that needs to be addressed beyond those things? Those things just allow people.
This country has always been politically violent. It's just now that there's 100,000 million cameras everywhere, you can actually see what's going on. But this country's always been politically violent. We've probably had more presidents shot than any other country. And somebody fact check me on that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'll tell you, they say it's the greatest country in the world. They say it's the most peaceful country in the world. Yeah, right, bro. We be shooting up presidents like crazy up in here. Shooting them up, shooting at them, shooting their ear holes, making their brains hang out. You name it, bro. Catching them slipping at the opera, catching them getting in the limo, catching them with the top down, with the top back, catching them waving. All of a sudden, no boy like this. Come on, bro.
To commit the violence, the mental health, the access to weapons. And that's the conversation we should be having. From an FBI perspective, I know you guys do a lot of assessing of the psychology of criminals and criminal minds.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I would say that's really the crux of this issue, is the dehumanizing of anyone on either side of the aisle, to get the subject to not feel that they are human at all, because what that does is there's a psychological barrier to hurting somebody. People don't want to do it. You don't want to see somebody hurt. It's just part of our nature. But if you dehumanize that person to a point where you feel morally obligated to
Look at Speedy
go out and
Gonzalez.
cause harm to that individual,
I love
then that
hearing a
breaks down
skinhead
that
talk
barrier.
about psychology.
Everybody
That's
has
amazing to me.
grievances, but it's moving to that violent ideation, wanting to commit violence against another individual. Is what all this rhetoric makes it so easy for somebody with a regular grievance to move to violent ideation. And that's a step in law enforcement that we're really worried about. After that, it becomes planning and researching, but it's that violent ideation. It's so easy nowadays to want to do. And in this case, the suspect even said he was morally obligated to do it in his manifesto.
That's the only images
he took it
they
even
have,
farther.
bro.
It wasn't just easy to commit violence. He felt like he had an obligation to commit that violence. That is what we really have to.
So then, but does that mean that then that person is mentally ill? Or like, that's what I'm trying to get at. We say that there's a mental health crisis. If you are so moved, as you describe, by the things that are happening, that are bubbling out there, that you are able to dehumanize somebody. And
I tell you, he's the only one that's sane. All the rest of us are insane. That's a whole pedophile in the Oval Office. We spend $1 billion a day killing Iranians. But when you talk about restitution for slavery, when you talk about student loan forgiveness, oh no, we can't have that, bro. They wouldn't even let them write a tariff check to everybody, all the money they raked in. Then they tried to with the government savings from out of 50 million people he fired, they're going to send us a check off of that. They wouldn't let him do that. Like, it's amazing to me that when it comes to enriching the citizenry, that's completely out of the question. But they'll spend billions to go kill up a bunch of Iranians and write the military $1 trillion check every year. Let's just do that, bro. Get out of here, bro.
And then you feel it's easier to carry out a violent act against them. Is that mental illness And because I suspect that they will probably use that as a defense.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe there's a mental health component to almost every active shooter incident. It's hard to imagine somebody who's rational and logical to move to the step of an active shooter, a mass shooting. Like even in the manifesto, he was talking about moving through innocent people. Like
the guy he's shooting at is not rational or logical. Look at all the irrational, illogical statements that dude has made since the day he was born. So let's not, I guess in this instance, I guess he became a genius when he's a genius when they're shooting at him. Like, it's amazing to me, bro.
Taking them down in order to get to people he wanted to. That's not rational. That's not somebody who's got a complete mental health. Now, I'm not a mental health professional, but I do think mental health is a component in almost all of these.
All right, Lance Lysing, thank you so much for giving us a lot to think about.
Really interesting.